Have you noticed that some people seem to age differently than others? Not just in how they look, but in how they move through the world with ease, with clarity, with a kind of quiet energy that makes you wonder what they know that the rest of us don't. We tend to assume these differences come down to genetics, or luck, or perhaps access to things we don't have. But what if the most significant factors are neither mysterious nor expensive? What if the difference between simply growing older and aging with genuine vitality is largely a matter of understanding a few fundamental principles? Principles that have been hiding in plain sight all along. Today on the Longevity Library, we're going to explore what actually shapes how we age, and why some of the things we've been taught to believe about health may be leading us in exactly the wrong direction. You are listening to the Longevity Library, where we archive the wisdom of healthy aging. The unhurried years. A gentle philosophy of longevity. There is a moment in midlife when the question shifts. For decades, we ask, what will I do next? Where will I go? What will I achieve? And then, quietly, without announcement, the question becomes something else. It becomes, how do I remain well enough to keep doing any of it at all? This is not a question of fear. It is not born from a desperate grasp at more time. It is something far more practical and far more ancient. It is the recognition that the body, this remarkable vessel that has carried us through every experience we have ever had, deserves the same thoughtful attention we have given to our careers, our families, our homes. It is the quiet wisdom of maintenance, of stewardship, of tending to something valuable not because it is broken, but because it matters. If you have lived 5 decades or more, you have already witnessed something extraordinary. You have watched as the people born in the same year, the same town, the same circumstances began to diverge. Some aged with apparent ease, their minds sharp, their steps steady, their presence in the world undiminished. Others seemed to weather faster, accumulating limitations, withdrawing from activities they once loved, their world growing smaller with each passing year. The same calendar age, yet a completely different experience of being alive. What separates these paths is not magic. It is not genetic luck alone, though genetics certainly play their part. It is not access to expensive treatments or secret medical knowledge. What separates them is something far more accessible and far more ordinary. It is a collection of daily choices, of small habitual patterns, that either support the body's remarkable capacity for resilience or slowly, silently undermine it. This is not a guide to living forever. Such a thing does not exist, and the pursuit of it often distracts from what actually matters. This is something more useful. It is an exploration of how to live the years you have with greater ease, greater clarity, and greater capacity to participate fully in your own life. It is a philosophy of longevity built not on fear of death, but on respect for life. Part 1. The body in time. To understand how to support the aging body, it helps first to appreciate what aging actually is. Not as a disease to be cured, but as a natural process with its own logic and its own vulnerabilities. Consider for a moment the incredible journey your cells have undertaken. The average cell in your body today is not the same cell that was there 10 years ago. Most of them have been replaced many times over. Your skin regenerates monthly. Your stomach lining renews itself every few days. Your red blood cells are replaced every 4 months. Even your bones, which seem so permanent, are slowly remodeled and rebuilt over the course of years. You are not a static object gradually wearing out. You are a dynamic system constantly rebuilding itself from scratch. Aging, from this perspective, is not simply the accumulation of damage. It is a shift in the quality of that rebuilding process. The materials become slightly less perfect. The repair mechanisms become slightly less efficient. The pace of renewal slows. This is why the strategies that support healthy aging are not about stopping time or reversing some imagined decline. They are about supporting the body's existing repair systems, giving them the conditions they need to do their best work. They are about removing obstacles that interfere with renewal and providing the raw materials that renewal requires. Think of it as tending a garden rather than repairing a machine. A machine either works or it breaks. But a garden is alive. It responds to conditions. It flourishes with good soil, adequate water, appropriate light. It struggles when these things are out of balance. And the gardener's role is not to force the plants to grow, but to create the conditions in which healthy growth naturally occurs. The body is far more like that garden than like any machine. It wants to be well. It has evolved over millions of years to seek balance, to repair damage, to maintain function. What we call aging is largely the story of what happens when the conditions for that self-repair become less than ideal over many decades. The question, then, is not how to fight the body. The question is how to create the conditions where it can do what it already knows how to do, only with a little more support than it might have needed in younger years. Part 2. The architecture of everyday movement. There is a common misunderstanding about physical activity that has quietly shaped the way several generations think about health. It is the idea that exercise is something you do for a discrete period, after which you are done, and the benefits are secured. You go for a run, you lift some weights, you attend a class, and then you return to your chair, your desk, your couch, having paid your dues to the body for another day. This understanding misses something fundamental about how the human form was designed to operate. If you could observe the daily life of our ancestors from just a few hundred generations ago, you would not see a pattern of intense exertion followed by prolonged stillness. You would see something closer to continuous low-grade movement. Walking, standing, squatting, reaching, carrying, shifting position. The body was rarely completely still for more than a few minutes at a time. It was constantly making small adjustments, small efforts, small movements that kept fluids moving, muscles engaged, and metabolism active. This pattern is not incidental to human health. It is foundational to it. Consider what happens in the body during periods of stillness. Within an hour of sitting, the activity of an enzyme called lipoprotein lipase begins to drop. This enzyme plays a crucial role in metabolizing fats, in pulling them from the bloodstream where they can do damage and moving them into tissues where they can be used for energy. When you sit for hours, this process slows dramatically. Fats that would have been cleared from the blood instead continue circulating, eventually depositing along arterial walls. At the same time, the large muscles of the legs and back, the body's primary consumers of sugar, fall into a state of low demand. They stop pulling glucose from the blood with the same efficiency. The pancreas, sensing sugar that is not being taken up by muscle, releases more insulin to encourage its storage. Over time, this pattern can lead the body's cells to become less responsive to insulin's signal, a condition that places strain on the entire metabolic system. The cardiovascular system is also affected. Blood circulation relies in part on the pumping action of contracting muscles, particularly in the legs. When those muscles are still for long periods, blood pools in the lower extremities. The heart must work harder to maintain circulation. The vessels themselves, without the regular compression and release of movement, become less elastic over time. None of this is to say that structured exercise lacks value. It has tremendous value. A morning walk, a swim, a session on a stationary bike, these things strengthen the heart, condition the lungs, and maintain muscle mass. But they do not fully reverse the effects of the 10 or 12 hours of stillness that may follow them. The body's metabolic systems operate on an hourly timescale, not a daily one. What matters is not just whether you move today, but whether you moved regularly throughout the day. This understanding shifts the focus from exercise as an event to movement as a continuous practice. It suggests a different relationship with physical activity, one less concerned with peak performance and more concerned with consistent engagement. The practical implications are straightforward. If you spend time at a desk, consider how you might introduce small interruptions into that stillness. Every 45 minutes or so, stand up, walk to another room, stretch your arms overhead, march in place for a minute. These small actions, none of them strenuous, none of them requiring special equipment or clothing, reset the metabolic clock. They reactivate those fat-metabolizing enzymes. They restore blood flow. They remind the muscles that they are still needed. If you spend evenings watching television, consider how you might make that time more active. Perhaps you stand and fold laundry during part of the show. Perhaps you use a stationary bike or a treadmill while you watch. Perhaps you simply get up during commercial breaks and walk around the room. The goal is not to eliminate rest or relaxation. The goal is to prevent rest from becoming immobility, to keep the garden lightly stirred rather than allowing it to settle into complete stillness. There is a simple test that can offer insight into how well this system is functioning. It requires only a sturdy chair without arms and a few seconds of your time. Stand facing the chair, then sit down and stand up again, without using your hands for support. Repeat this 10 times, as quickly as you comfortably can, and note how long it takes. If the 10 repetitions require more than 15 or 16 seconds, or if you feel unstable at any point, it suggests that the muscles responsible for this fundamental movement pattern may need more regular attention. This test matters because it measures something real. The ability to rise from a chair without assistance is not just a convenience. It is a predictor of future independence. It reflects the strength of the legs, the balance of the core, the coordination of the nervous system. These are the capacities that allow a person to continue living in their own home, to recover from a stumble, to participate in the ordinary activities of daily life. And these capacities are maintained not primarily through heroic efforts at the gym, but through the accumulated effect of thousands of small movements performed consistently over time. Each time you stand up from a chair, you are practicing this skill. Each time you take the stairs instead of the elevator, you are reinforcing it. Each time you choose to walk to the mailbox rather than collecting the mail later, you are contributing to it. This is the architecture of everyday movement. It is not complicated. It does not require specialized knowledge. It asks only that we remain aware of the body's need for regular engagement, and that we arrange our days, our homes, our habits to support that engagement rather than working against it. Part 3. The question of what we add. In recent decades, a curious development has occurred in how people approach nutrition. Alongside the food we eat, we have introduced a second category of consumption: the supplement. These small pills and capsules, sold in gleaming bottles with promises of support and protection, have become a routine part of daily life for millions. The logic seems unassailable. If certain nutrients are good for us, then more of them must be better. If our diets are imperfect, supplements can fill the gaps. If aging creates additional needs, these products can meet them. This logic, while appealing, overlooks something important about how the body interacts with the substances it receives. The human digestive system evolved over millions of years in the presence of whole foods. It learned to extract nutrients from plants and animals, from leaves and roots and fruits and flesh. In those whole foods, nutrients never appear alone. Vitamin C in an orange comes accompanied by bioflavonoids, by fiber, by potassium, by hundreds of other compounds that influence how the vitamin is absorbed and used. Magnesium in a handful of almonds arrives with fiber and healthy fats and other minerals that affect its journey through the body. This matters because the body's systems are calibrated for this complexity. They expect nutrients to arrive in context, with cofactors and moderators that influence their activity. When isolated nutrients appear in high concentrations, the body treats them differently. They are not necessarily recognized as food. They may be processed as foreign substances, filtered out by the liver and kidneys, excreted rather than utilized. There is also the question of balance. Nutrients do not operate independently in the body. They interact. Zinc and copper compete for absorption. Calcium and magnesium have a complex relationship. High doses of one can create deficiencies in another. When supplements provide isolated nutrients in amounts far beyond what food could supply, they can disrupt these delicate relationships, creating imbalances that were not present before. The manufacturing process itself introduces additional considerations. Supplements are not simply ground-up foods compressed into pills. They contain binders, fillers, coatings, preservatives, substances that allow them to hold their shape, remain stable on shelves, and slide easily out of bottles. Some of these ingredients, considered harmless in small amounts, have raised questions among researchers. Titanium dioxide, used to whiten some supplements, has been classified as a possible carcinogen by some international bodies. Magnesium stearate, a common lubricant, can form a film in the digestive tract that may interfere with absorption. These are not the ingredients that appear on the front of the bottle, but they are present nonetheless. This is not to suggest that all supplements lack value or that no one benefits from them. There are situations where targeted supplementation, under appropriate guidance, can be genuinely helpful. A person with documented deficiency may need specific support. Someone with limited sun exposure may benefit from vitamin D. Those with restricted diets may require certain nutrients they cannot otherwise obtain. But these are specific interventions for specific situations, not general recommendations for everyone. The broader observation, supported by many large studies over many years, is that people who take multivitamins regularly do not, on average, live longer or healthier lives than those who do not. Some studies have even suggested associations between certain supplements and increased risks, though these findings are complex and should not be oversimplified. What is clear is that the promise of supplements as insurance against poor diet, as a shortcut to nutrition, has not been supported by the evidence. The alternative is not to abandon all supplements, but to shift the focus back to food. Whole foods provide nutrition in the form the body recognizes. They deliver nutrients in balanced combinations, with natural cofactors that support their use. They provide fiber, which supplements cannot replicate, and which feeds the beneficial bacteria in the gut. They require chewing, which slows eating and supports digestion. They engage the senses, contributing to satisfaction and the psychological experience of nourishment. For those concerned about nutritional gaps, the most reliable approach is to examine the diet itself. Are vegetables present in variety and abundance? Are there sources of healthy fats, of protein, of complex carbohydrates? Is the diet monotonous or diverse? Before adding something to the diet, it is worth considering whether the diet itself might be adjusted first. This is not a more difficult path. It is simply a different one. It asks for attention rather than compliance, for curiosity rather than convenience. It treats nutrition as something we do, not something we take. And in that shift, it aligns more closely with how the body was designed to be nourished. Part 4. The stimulus we have learned to ignore. There is a substance consumed daily by a majority of adults in the modern world. It is legal, widely available, and deeply embedded in social rituals. It is used to start the day, to punctuate work, to facilitate conversation, to combat fatigue. It is rarely thought of as a drug, though pharmacologically that is precisely what it is. Caffeine, the active compound in coffee, tea, and many soft drinks, has a subtle but significant effect on the body's regulatory systems. It works primarily by blocking the receptors for adenosine, a neurotransmitter that promotes sleep and relaxation. Adenosine accumulates in the brain throughout the day, creating the sensation of mounting tiredness. By interfering with this process, caffeine creates an artificial state of alertness, temporarily overriding the body's natural signals of fatigue. In a younger body, this intervention is relatively straightforward. The liver metabolizes caffeine efficiently, clearing it from the system within a few hours. Sleep, when it finally comes, is deep and restorative. The body's natural rhythms reassert themselves overnight. With age, however, this changes. The liver's metabolic efficiency gradually declines. The same cup of coffee that cleared the system in 6 hours at age 30 may require 10 or 12 hours at age 65. This means that caffeine consumed in the afternoon is still circulating at midnight, still blocking adenosine receptors, still interfering with the initiation and maintenance of deep sleep. The quality of that sleep matters enormously. During the deepest stages of sleep, the brain engages in a kind of housekeeping. The glymphatic system, discovered only in recent years, becomes active, flushing away metabolic waste products that have accumulated during waking hours. Among these waste products are proteins associated with cognitive decline. When sleep is disrupted, this cleaning process is incomplete. The residue accumulates, day after day, year after year. Caffeine also acts as a diuretic, increasing urine production and fluid loss. In younger adults, this is easily compensated by drinking more. But the thirst mechanism becomes less sensitive with age. Many older adults are mildly dehydrated without feeling thirsty. Adding a diuretic to this situation can worsen the imbalance, thickening the blood, reducing circulation to the brain, and increasing the workload on the kidneys. There is also the question of dependency. Regular caffeine consumption leads the brain to adapt by producing more adenosine receptors. When caffeine is present, these extra receptors are blocked, and alertness is maintained. But when caffeine is absent, the unblocked receptors create a powerful sensation of fatigue and often headache. The user reaches for more caffeine to relieve these symptoms, mistaking withdrawal for a normal need for stimulation. The cycle perpetuates itself. None of this is to suggest that an occasional cup of coffee or tea is harmful. For many, these beverages are sources of genuine pleasure, of ritual, of social connection. The concern arises when consumption becomes automatic, when it is driven by dependency rather than enjoyment, when it begins to interfere with the very rest the body requires. For those who suspect their caffeine use may have become more habitual than intentional, a gradual reduction can be revealing. Reducing intake slowly, over weeks, allows the brain to adjust its receptor density back toward its natural state. As this happens, many people discover that their baseline energy is more stable than they had realized. The afternoon slump they attributed to normal aging may have been, at least in part, a mild withdrawal state. The trouble falling asleep may have been the lingering effect of a stimulant taken too late in the day. What emerges on the other side of this adjustment is not necessarily a life without caffeine, but a life where caffeine is chosen rather than required. A cup of coffee becomes an occasional pleasure rather than a daily necessity. Sleep becomes deeper and more reliable. Energy throughout the day becomes more even, less dependent on the next dose. The body's natural rhythms, given the chance, are remarkably capable of regulating themselves. They ask only that we not override them constantly, that we allow them to do what they have evolved to do. Part 5. The invisible environment of information. In the course of a single day, a person living in the modern world encounters more information than an individual a few centuries ago would have encountered in a lifetime. Much of this information arrives through screens, television, computer, telephone, and much of it is designed to capture attention through emotional impact. The news, in particular, has evolved into something quite different from its original purpose. Where once it served to inform citizens about events relevant to their communities and their lives, it now serves a different master: the economics of attention. In a crowded information landscape, the stories that get told are the stories that keep people watching. And what keeps people watching, reliably, is threat. This is not a conspiracy. It is a simple consequence of how brains work. The human nervous system evolved to prioritize threats. A rustle in the grass that might be a predator is worth attending to, even if it turns out to be only the wind. The cost of missing a real threat is far higher than the cost of responding to a false one. Our brains are, therefore, biased toward negativity, toward alertness, toward scanning for danger. Modern news media exploit this bias with precision. The story selected, the images shown, the language used, the music played, all are calibrated to trigger the threat response. And the body responds as if the threats were real. Heart rate increases. Stress hormones are released. Blood pressure rises. The system prepares for action. But in the modern world, there is no action to take. The threat is not in the room. It is happening somewhere else, to someone else, and there is nothing to be done about it. The body's preparation for action has nowhere to go. The stress hormones circulate. The blood pressure remains elevated. And gradually, over time, the system remains in a state of low-grade activation that was never meant to be sustained. This chronic activation has consequences. Sustained elevation of stress hormones is associated with increased inflammation throughout the body. It interferes with sleep. It affects digestion. It can contribute to anxiety and depressed mood. It shifts the body's resources away from maintenance and repair and toward immediate readiness. A trade-off that makes sense in a true emergency, but becomes costly when prolonged indefinitely. The content of the news amplifies this effect. The stories that dominate are the worst things happening anywhere in the world, presented as if they were typical. Rare events become familiar. Distant tragedies feel immediate. The cumulative impression is of a world far more dangerous, more chaotic, more hopeless than the one any individual actually inhabits. This distorted perception becomes the lens through which daily life is viewed, coloring everything with a shade of threat that does not truly belong there. For those in later life, this matters in particular ways. The years after 50 often bring a natural shift in perspective, a desire to focus on what is meaningful rather than what is merely urgent. The constant intrusion of distant crises interferes with this shift. It keeps attention pulled outward, toward problems that cannot be solved, rather than inward, toward the experiences and relationships that actually constitute a life. The alternative is not ignorance. It is not a refusal to engage with the world. It is a more intentional relationship with information. It is recognizing that being informed does not require being saturated, that understanding the world does not require consuming its worst moments repeatedly. A practical approach might begin with a simple experiment. A week without news. No television news. No news websites. No social media feeds filled with headlines. For 7 days. The information diet consists of other things: books, conversations, nature, music, whatever else fills the hours. At the end of the week, many people notice something unexpected. Their anxiety has decreased. Their sleep has improved. Their attention feels more available for the people and activities immediately present. The world has not collapsed in their absence. It has, in fact, become more manageable. After such an experiment, a more sustainable relationship can be built. Perhaps news is checked once a day, for a limited time, from a source that provides context rather than merely threat. Perhaps certain types of content are avoided altogether. Perhaps the morning and evening hours, the times when the mind is most impressionable, are protected from the news altogether. The goal is not to build a wall between oneself and the world. It is to recognize that attention is a limited resource, perhaps the most limited resource there is. Where it goes, the rest of the mind follows. What it dwells on, the body responds to. Choosing what to attend to is, in a very real sense, choosing what kind of life to live. Part 6. The biology of belonging. Of all the factors that influence how people age, one of the most powerful is also one of the most overlooked. It does not appear in blood tests. It is not prescribed by doctors. It cannot be purchased in stores. Yet its absence is associated with a risk to health comparable to smoking, to obesity, to physical inactivity. This factor is social connection, not casual acquaintance, but meaningful belonging. The experience of being seen, known, valued by others. The sense that one is part of something larger than oneself. The reason this matters so much lies deep in human history. For millions of years, our ancestors survived not as individuals, but as groups. The lone human, separated from the tribe, was a human with drastically reduced chances of survival. Predators were more dangerous alone. Food was harder to find. Injury became a death sentence. The brain evolved, accordingly, to interpret isolation as a threat. When a person becomes chronically isolated, the body responds as if to danger. Stress hormones rise. Inflammation increases. Blood pressure elevates. The immune system functions less effectively, producing fewer antibodies and more inflammatory cells. The body prepares for a crisis that never comes, and the cost of that preparation is paid in accelerated wear on multiple systems. This is not a matter of personality or preference. It is not about being extroverted or introverted. It is about the fundamental human need for connection, a need as basic as the need for food or water. When it is met, the body operates more smoothly. When it is not, the body struggles. Later life presents particular challenges to this need. Retirement removes the daily contact with colleagues that structured much of adult social life. Children move away, absorbed in their own families and careers. Friends retire and relocate. Spouses and partners may become ill or die. Mobility limitations can make it harder to leave the house. Each of these changes, by itself, may seem manageable. Together, they can create a slow drift toward isolation that happens almost without notice. The person who once had lunch with coworkers, chatted with neighbors, attended community events, and visited with family may gradually find that these contacts have dwindled. The phone rings less often. The calendar has fewer entries. The days become quieter, emptier. And because this happens gradually, it can seem normal, even welcome. Peace and quiet are desirable, after all. But there is a difference between the quiet of contentment and the quiet of disconnection. Rebuilding connection in later life requires intentionality. The networks that once formed naturally through work, through school, through child rearing must now be built deliberately. This can feel awkward at first, like learning a skill that once came easily. But the evidence suggests it is worth the effort. The forms this connection takes can vary widely. For some, it means volunteering with organizations that serve causes they care about, working alongside others who share their values. For others, it means joining groups organized around interests, book clubs, hiking groups, gardening societies, choirs. For still others, It means deepening relationships with neighbors, making the effort to know the people who live nearby, to exchange more than a wave. Technology offers tools for connection as well, though they work best as supplements to in-person contact rather than replacements. Video calls can bridge distance, allowing grandparents to watch grandchildren grow, far-flung siblings to share weekly conversations. Online communities can connect people with rare interests or circumstances, providing a sense of belonging that local geography cannot supply. What matters is not the specific form, but the underlying reality. Regular, meaningful contact with others. Conversations that go beyond weather and logistics. Shared experiences. The sense that one matters to someone, and that someone matters to one. This is not about filling a calendar with social obligations. It is about maintaining the web of relationships that reminds the body and brain that they are not alone. And that reminder, it turns out, is as physiological as it is emotional. It influences hormone levels, immune function, cardiovascular health. It shapes how the body ages. Part 7. The renewal that comes from stillness. If movement is one half of the body's rhythm, rest is the other. And in the modern world, rest has become surprisingly difficult to achieve. True rest is not simply the absence of activity. It is a specific physiological state, one in which the body shifts resources away from action and toward repair. During deep sleep, growth hormone is released, supporting tissue maintenance. Cellular cleanup processes accelerate. Memories are consolidated. The brain's waste clearance system becomes active, flushing out metabolic byproducts that have accumulated during the day. This state is not optional. It is not a luxury that can be postponed or reduced without consequence. It is as essential as food, as water, as air. And yet, for many, it has become elusive. The reasons are multiple. Light exposure after dark suppresses melatonin, the hormone that helps regulate sleep timing. Evening screen use delivers stimulating content directly to the brain at the very time it should be winding down. Caffeine, consumed even early in the day, can still be circulating at midnight in older bodies. Worry about money, about health, about children, about the state of the world, keeps the mind active when it should be still. The result is a population that sleeps less, on average, than it did a generation ago, and whose sleep is less restorative when it comes. This matters for aging in particular ways. The repair processes that happen during sleep are the same processes that slow the accumulation of damage over time. When sleep is shortened or fragmented, that accumulation accelerates. The practical steps toward better rest are well known, but worth reviewing. Consistency matters. Going to bed and waking at roughly the same times helps anchor the body's internal clock. Darkness matters. Reducing light exposure in the evening and keeping the bedroom truly dark supports melatonin production. Coolness matters. The body's core temperature drops during sleep, and a cool room facilitates this. Quiet matters. Eliminating or masking disruptive sounds protects sleep continuity. Beyond these environmental factors, there is also the question of mental quiet. The mind that cannot stop planning, worrying, reviewing, anticipating, is a mind that cannot fully rest. Practices that cultivate mental stillness, meditation, gentle breathing, reflective reading, can help ease the transition from activity to rest. So can the simple habit of putting aside screens an hour before bed, allowing the brain to disengage from the constant stream of information that characterizes modern life. For those who have struggled with sleep for years, these changes may not produce immediate transformation. Patterns built over decades take time to shift, but gradual improvement is still improvement. Even small gains in sleep quality accumulate over time, contributing to the body's ongoing work of maintenance and repair. Part 8. Three ancient practices in modern context. Across cultures and centuries, certain practices appear repeatedly in the lives of those who age well. They are not secrets. They are not proprietary. They are simply observations about what supports human thriving, passed down through generations and now, in some cases, confirmed by modern research. The first of these is direct contact with the earth. In many traditional cultures, people spent their days in barefoot contact with soil, grass, sand. They worked the earth with their hands. They sat on the ground. They were, in a literal sense, grounded. Modern life has largely eliminated this contact. Shoes with insulating soles separate feet from ground. Floors of wood and concrete entile separate bodies from earth. We live, for the most part, suspended above the ground rather than connected to it. Research in recent decades has begun to explore what this separation might mean. The Earth's surface carries a subtle electrical charge, and when skin makes direct contact, that charge transfers to the body. This transfer appears to have measurable effects. It reduces markers of inflammation. It improves sleep. It normalizes the daily rhythm of cortisol, the stress hormone. It stabilizes the heart's variability, a marker of nervous system balance. The mechanism, researchers suggest, involves free electrons from the earth acting as antioxidants, neutralizing the positively charged free radicals that contribute to inflammation and cellular damage. It is a simple exchange, as old as life itself, made newly relevant by its absence from modern life. The practice is simple: bare skin on natural ground, a walk on the grass without shoes, sitting on a beach with feet in the sand, gardening with bare hands. Even 20 minutes a day appears to produce measurable effects. It costs nothing, requires no equipment, and can be done almost anywhere there is a patch of earth. The second practice is a particular pattern of eating, one that gives the digestive system regular periods of rest. Before the modern era of constant food availability, humans naturally experienced intervals between meals. The body was not continuously engaged in digestion. It had time to shift resources elsewhere, including towards cellular cleanup and repair. This pattern, now studied under the name of time-restricted eating, involves confining food consumption to a consistent window each day, typically 8 to 10 hours. During the remaining 14 to 16 hours, the digestive system rests. The body, no longer processing incoming food, can focus on other tasks. One of these tasks is autophagy, a process in which cells break down and recycle damaged components, clearing out material that might otherwise accumulate and interfere with function. This is not a diet in the sense of restricting what foods are eaten, though food quality certainly matters. It is a pattern, a timing, a rhythm. It aligns eating with the body's natural cycles of activity and rest, of fuel intake and cellular maintenance. The third practice is perhaps the most accessible and the most overlooked: genuine laughter. Not the polite chuckle of social convention, but the deep, involuntary laugh that arises from genuine amusement. Laughter, it turns out, is a physiological event with wide-ranging effects. It releases endorphins, the body's natural pain-relieving compounds. It reduces stress hormones. It increases immune activity. It improves blood flow. It exercises the diaphragm and intercostal muscles. It is, in a sense, a form of internal exercise, one that requires no effort and produces no fatigue. People who laugh frequently, studies suggest, have lower rates of heart disease, better immune function, and longer average lifespans. They also, not incidentally, enjoy their lives more. The practice is not complicated. Seek out humor. Watch comedy. Spend time with people who make you laugh. Cultivate the ability to find amusement in the ordinary absurdities of life. Treat laughter not as a random occurrence, but as a legitimate health practice, one worth prioritizing. Part 9. Integration. These various strands: movement, nutrition, stimulation, connection, rest, grounding, laughter, are not separate programs to be managed. They are aspects of a single reality. The body's need for conditions that support its natural tendency toward balance and repair. The body that moves regularly throughout the day, that receives its nutrients from whole foods, that experiences genuine rest at night, that maintains meaningful connections with others, that limits chronic stress from information and stimulation, that spends time in contact with the earth, that laughs genuinely and often. This body is not being forced to do anything. It is simply being allowed to do what it already knows how to do. This is the heart of the matter. Health in later life is not primarily about intervention. It is about removal. It is about clearing away the obstacles that interfere with the body's own intelligence. It is about creating conditions rather than imposing treatments. The obstacles are many. Prolonged stillness. Processed foods isolated from their natural context. Chronic caffeine disrupting natural rhythms. Constant information activating stress responses. Social isolation triggering ancient threat responses. Separation from the earth. Absence of laughter. Each of these, by itself, may seem minor. Together, they create a cumulative load that the body must carry. Removing them does not require perfection. It does not require dramatic transformation overnight. It requires only gradual, consistent adjustment. A few more minutes of walking each day. One meal shifted toward whole foods. A slightly earlier bedtime. One meaningful conversation per week. A few minutes barefoot on grass. One genuinely funny movie. These are not heroic measures. They are small returns to patterns the body recognizes, patterns it has known for millions of years. They are not about adding years to life in some abstract sense. They are about adding life to years, about maintaining the capacity to participate fully in one's own existence. Part 10. A calm conclusion. There is a tendency in discussions of longevity to focus on the endpoint, on the number of years accumulated, on the distance traveled rather than the quality of the journey. This focus misses something essential. The goal is not simply to reach an advanced age. The goal is to arrive there with capacities intact, with the ability to walk, to think, to connect, to enjoy. The goal is to be present for one's own life, not merely to occupy time. This is not guaranteed by any practice, by any diet, by any supplement. Genetics play a role. Circumstance plays a role. Chance plays a role. There are no promises, no certainties, no formulas that work for everyone every time. But there are probabilities. There are tendencies. There are patterns that, across populations and across time, are associated with better outcomes. And these patterns, these tendencies, these probabilities are available to anyone willing to attend to them. They do not require perfection. They do not require obsession. They require only attention, only intention, only the recognition that how we live matters, not just for the number of our years, but for the quality of them. The body you inhabit has carried you through every experience you have ever had. It has healed from injuries, fought off infections, learned countless skills, adapted to countless circumstances. It has done all this without your conscious direction, guided by systems evolved over millions of years. It asks little in return, only that you not work against it, only that you provide the conditions it needs, only that you remember, in the small choices of each day, that you are tending something precious. The years ahead are not guaranteed, but they are possible. And how they are lived is, to a remarkable degree, shaped by what is done now, today. in this moment, not through fear of what might come, but through respect for what already is. This is not a race. It is not a contest. It is simply the ongoing work of being alive, of maintaining what has been given, of living fully in whatever time remains. And that work, ordinary as it seems, is worthy of all the attention we can give it. The single most important takeaway from everything we've explored is this: how you age is not determined by some fixed script written in your genes, but by the accumulated effect of thousands of small, daily choices about how you move, what you consume, who you connect with, and what you give your attention to. These choices are not heroic measures. They are simply a return to patterns the human body has recognized for millions of years. If this reflection has stirred something in you, a question, a recognition, a thought about your own path forward, we would genuinely welcome hearing about it in the comments. Your perspective adds depth to this ongoing conversation. And if you would like to continue exploring the principles of healthy aging, we invite you to explore other films in this library and to subscribe so that new wisdom finds its way to you. This is the Longevity Library. Listen, learn, and live longer.